In this lesson for this weekend, we're going to find out that Jesus will withdraw. Is he going to find sanctuary? In Daniel Defoe's novel, Robinson Crusoe, the marooned voyager is shipwrecked on an island rich with, symbolism. Defoe names the island Despair. We recognize this fictional place because we too find ourselves isolated in real life. The harder we try to get off the island, the harder it is to leave, and the more cut off we become. Especially for anyone these days who's trying to do some good work in the world, we encounter this incredible gap between where we are and where we want to be. Between what we know God is calling us to do and the reality of the way life actually is. That's where we find people in our text this morning. They might not have called their place the island of despair, but they felt the gloom that Isaiah describes of the deep darkness. They found themselves in a church divided among various parties and factions in Corinth. Or in Jesus' case, he came face to face with the devil himself, but we skip that until the first week of Lent, and he survives. So even when you've stared into the heart and the heat of darkness, the experience can leave each and every one of us so disoriented that there's only one thing to do, and that is to withdraw. Matthew describes it this way in verse 12. When Jesus heard that John had been arrested, he withdrew to Galilee. The Greek word carries the same meaning as an advancing army in retreat, or to go to a place of rescue, a place for resting. Watch the word withdrew and count how many times it's going to appear in the gospel text of Matthew. And if you have the time, sit down and read through the gospel and highlight every time you see that word. We want to think that things came easily for Jesus, but they didn't. The moment that Jesus finishes his initiation into his ministry and service, his friend and mentor and cousin is arrested. He knew the arrest was the beginning of the end for the Baptist friend and relative. So Jesus comes face to face with that gap between heaven and earth. Have you ever lived in that territory? When you've prayed, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, and we're still waiting for the as it is. If you found yourself there, our tendency is to become maybe burned out or resentful, maybe even angry. And all of those would be reasonable responses considering who we are, our humanity. You might have been called to the medical profession and you find yourself spending more time, not with patients, but with all the iPad stuff that you have to enter in and meetings that you have to go to. And as a teacher, you want to just be with the kids. You want to be with the students, only to be consumed with factions within the administration and among the staff waiting for you to ally with their little cause. The good news is that you're not alone. None of us are. Jesus gives us a pattern to follow. When you find yourself beached on the proverbial island of despair, he goes to Naphtali and Zebulun. And if you have a Bible with maps, you'll notice that these two locations, they're old tribal names from even before Isaiah's time. This is a time when they used to mark roads and streets with family names and clan names. They claimed squatters' rights to real estate. There were a few native families who could remember a time like this when Isaiah prophesied it, that the people of Naphtali and Zebulun would answer the call to battle, that it would be as Isaiah said it was in the days of Midian. The last time these groups of people came together for any good cause was in Judges chapter 6 and 7. Like Isaiah, Paul, and Matthew, this was a dark time for the tribal group as they dealt with the band of wheat thieves and bandits from the arch rivals, those Midianites. The Israelites were so terrified of these insurgents who would steal their wheat crops. They actually threshed their wheat in the middle of the night in caves and stationed guards to warn others of the Midianite bandits when they were coming. It's straight out of a horror movie or any town, city, village that armed guards have invaded. God sent his angel to the wheat farmer named Gideon to test him. Gideon thought he was testing God with multiple fleeces, but God was testing him. If you know the story, Gideon assembled an army not of 32,000, but whittled it down to a mighty 300. Wouldn't you know it? The soldiers came from Naphtali, Zebulun, and Manasseh. They won the battle over Midian with wit and stealth. Yes, they were breaking 300 pots and sending the Midianites into chaos. And that's why Isaiah, and I think Matthew also, saw in this miracle what was happening. The kingdom of heaven withdrew. When Jesus was born, the Magi withdrew. That's the same word, and they went back home. And when Herod loomed large, Joseph withdrew to Nazareth. And so when Jesus finished his initiation, he withdrew to assemble a Gideon's army of disciples. He needed to gather the people together, not to overwhelm them with miracles and signs and wonders. Jesus assembled a band of followers, much like Gideon, to demonstrate how people could trust in God more than anything else, to summon the people from the very regions who had last trusted God to do the work the way God does the work, not with advancement or progress, but retreat. God says the weapon we're going to use in this battle is repentance. In this context, repentance is not feeling sorry that we've done something wrong, nor is it regret, I wish I had done this sooner. Repentance, the process of revolutionizing their lives around this one person. It's the way that we show Jesus is trustworthy. Repentance does not so much settle our lives, but it might unsettle our very existence. The more we appropriate Jesus as our way of living, the more unsettled our existence becomes. We discover new things that need to be understood and surrendered to him. We leave behind the factions and trust in Jesus as our light. This process of retreat and repentance is coincidentally how Crusoe and Jesus have left behind despair. Jesus starts connecting with others and trains them in the life appropriating him. Crusoe begins to live with the goats, and he works there until he discovers a footprint. He remains faithful to adapt his life to the experience and existence until he can do something else. I don't know where you find yourself today. Are you ready to advance or already beached? Maybe you feel like you're on an island wondering, how did you arrive? But I do know from both angles, Jesus would say, prepare and retreat. And when you're there, begin to put into practice the repentance necessary for Jesus to actually reign. For once you're in retreat, that's really when the change truly begins. And the church says,